decade, and although it is being said that next decade is going to be India's decade, let me talk about the long-term outlook on the economy, and then I want to tell you that I'm extremely upbeat on the long-term outlook on the economy, and this is just not about next decade. And although it is being said that next decade is going to be India's decade, I think it's almost like next 5 decades are going to be India's decade, and we are already kind of started a kind of a takeoff stage of our economy. We have heard Prime Minister, Finance Minister talking about that we are fifth largest and very soon we will become third largest, and they seem to be very confident about that. And the reason for their confidence is it's actually is not so much about economics but purely arithmetics, right? You all are in the market, you know the power of compounding. We have been growing, at 6% or 6.5%, sometimes 7%, sometimes 5.5%. So on an average, about 6%, for a very long period of time, right? And this is purely a power of compounding. That there is now a momentum. It's compounding. It's also purely a matter of not only arithmetics, but it's also a matter of physics. Right? That when there is a momentum, the momentum continues unless and until some abrupt event happens, and which kind of it stops it. Right? So I think it's a pure arithmetic and physics that that our economy will continue to grow for a very long period of time. Right? And I'll tell you, the drivers behind that, right? One of the key drivers is the growth in the absolute amount. So 6% when our economy was very small, versus 6% now that the economy is, becoming larger. The base effect, is one of the key reasons why we are seeing so much of growth now in the economy. Because 6%, if it is consistent for, let's say, 12 years, it's doubled. So in absolute amount, if you are growing 100 rupees, now you are growing 200 rupees than what it was, let's say, in 2010-11. So I think it's a sheer base effect on our economy that we are big, and that's why we'll continue to be. And that's how all economies have become bigger and bigger. So I think that's in our favor. The second I want to emphasize is that, I think very few people really talk about the rate of saving and the capital formation happening in the economy. Indians are known to be people who are very, frugal and who are always saving. And I think that habit continues. That's part of our culture. Wherever Indians are, they tend to save more money, and the saving results into a capital formation. Our capital formation is in the range of 28 to 30%, which seems to be very high as compared to many other economies. And in the past, the capital formation was low because our base was. Now that the base has become bigger, the saving and capital formation is kind of, is at a much rapid pace, and that's good for our economy. The third factor I want to quickly touch upon, is the consumption story. If you look at in the overall in Asia, Southeast Asia particularly, I think the economies are more export oriented while we are consumption oriented, right? So consumption oriented is always safer because it's kind of, to some extent it is kind of insulated from the external shocks that the export related economy may have, right? The sheer size of the economy and the consumption and the population, I think it keeps adding to the overall the growth rate, and we are not as much dependent on export, and I think that kind of reduces the risk factors in the economy, right? Everyone knows about the advantages of demography, right? And I'm sure everyone understands the advantage of we are a young economy, and then our young population, the dependency ratio is kind of coming down. But it's also the scale advantage that we have because it's large population. We have this scale advantage, and it's just not about the young population advantage, right? I think the other topic I want to touch upon is the prowess in the technology field, right? India is the technology answer to the global digitization problem, right? The skill sets that we have in technology and in the volume in that we have, there is no other place, no other country which is able to produce that type of technology prowess. There are some pockets like the Eastern Europe or in Vietnam, where there is this technology is in progress, but anybody wants to have 500 engineers, 1,000 engineers, 2,000 engineers, they have no choice but to come to India and set up either a captive center or go to an outsourcing, outsourcing companies in India. So this technology prowess is something which is very critical, and more so in the coming days, as the technology is going to be the key driver in the days of the AI and machine learning. Right. I think innovation is the other part that because we are frugal, we are as a culture, we are very innovative. Now we all know about Chandrayaan 3 they are there in the orbit, but you also know that we are able to send the spacecraft at a much lower cost. But there is a fundamental difference between the way the Russians and the Americans had sent their spacecraft versus what we are doing. What you might have seen something called slingshot. So when you do a slingshot, it is kind of with a much lower power of space a spacecraft that can go into the orbit. Right? So it's an innovation. So I think innovation is an important part, and I think in the days to come, you will see a lot more innovation to happen. I'm expecting a lot more innovation to happen in areas like drone, for example. Even today, if you look at the drone technology has grown more in, and the sophisticated drones are coming from countries like Turkey and Iran. There is no reason why India won't be able to produce good drones, given our skills in the spacecraft industry. So I think innovation is important, and I think we are progressing well in the innovation part as well, right? There's one very different point that I'm going to talk about. Right? There's a lot of talk about now again from a unipolar world where USA was one dominating factor. Now it is becoming again a bipolar to say that it is US and China. Right? I believe that there are going to be 3 pockets of superpowers. Right? India, China are the 2-1. And no, I'm not going to talk about India. I think India is far from being superpower. But the third superpower, in my view, is going to be some of the large technology companies. Right? The large technology companies are nowadays decide everything and anything that you do, right? From what you read, how you read, the social media, the impact on it. It can make the election win or lose. It can impact everything in your life is now being governed by technology, and they are so powerful, they are so rich as well, that they are going to become a third superpower in the days to come. And the reason why I'm mentioning is that Indians are on some of the in some of these top tech companies. Indians are heading to some of those companies, right? So for India, from this soft power standpoint, these technology companies, which are going to be the third superpower in the world, they are going to decide the fates of war, they are going to decide the fates of election, they are going to fates of our every day-to-day life. I think that's the most important part, and our influence over there is going to be the most important soft power in the days to come. Of course, there are some other advantages, like we are a low-cost economy. We continue to be so be a low-cost economy. There is going to be a lot more increase in the defense budget of some of the European countries, and that's also a lot of outsourcing activities are going to likely to happen in defense sector for us. So these are all some of the advantages which I think is going to drive our economy for next 10, 20, 30 years. And I think I'm extremely upbeat on that. Of course, there are some derailers also I want to talk about. I think there's an over social engineering. Social engineering is sometimes could be very dangerous if it goes out of our hand. There's a lot of inequality of income, a lot of wealth that's getting generated is pocketed by the top 3% of the population. I think that's also a factor. Not only from the individual to individual inequality, but from one state to another state. I think that inequality is also going to impact. So I think India has to grow consistently across all states and not necessarily in some pockets. I think otherwise it could be a great derailer. Climate, we have seen the climate changes are big derailers, and that's going to continue. I think that's a global issue that climate changes are going to to kind of continue to impact us. And in general, the world has become far more volatile than what we have ever witnessed. Everything is becoming very volatile. Everything is getting weaponized. It's just not the weapons are the weapons, but everything in life is getting weaponized, whether it's a payment system, financial system, or whether it's food grain, of course, oil. Everything is nowadays weaponized. And that's why I think globally things are becoming very volatile. So this is in nutshell about why I think the Indian economy is in a safe zone for next 10-20 years to come. There are derailers, we need to take care of that, but otherwise I think we are all set for a takeoff in our economy. That's the long and short of my thoughts about the economy. If you have questions right now, I can take some of them. Otherwise, there are some questions that have been earlier given. I can talk about that.
Thank you very much, Chintan Bhai. This is Utpal Shah, and I have one question related to the new age companies like yours.
I can't hear. It looks like someone is talking. Sorry, I'm not able to hear.
Ajay, ત્યાંથી unmute કરું પડશે. Okay, are you able to hear me now? Am I audible?
I can't hear.
Okay, I think they are still. How about now? Is it? Okay, am I audible now? Still not?
Okay, I can hear now.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I had a question related to the new age company like yours versus the old, brick and mortar companies. So what are your thoughts on the growth on the electronic space and the online companies like InfoEdge and others? So we have seen the IPOs not do so well for a lot of these companies, but what do you think future holds for these new age companies?
Didn't get the question exactly. The voice was a little muffled, but if I have understood correctly, you want to talk about the new age economy and the old age economy, and the info age growth in that. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. I'll I can cover this in some of the. I have about 4-5 questions already given to me, and I think that the answer to your question will get covered in that. So let me begin that question, and if I have not covered that, I can always come back and happy to answer more questions as well. Right. So the first question that's given to me is about the impact of the major policies of government on the digital India, Skill India, startups, and all that, right? Yeah, I think that's super important, and I think that's one of our big success story is in this front. So all the digital initiatives that government has taken right from beginning, from Aadhaar card that happened, and right now if you look at the UPSI. Or, for example, even when you are crossing the toll and you have the FASTag, I just came by flight, so Digi Yatra was something great. We have seen how the digital certification and helped us in the COVID process. Passport, everything is kind of super important. And I talked about the technology power that we have. I think you will see that technology, this power is getting used more and more in a part of diplomacy also. And we are rolling out UPSI, for example, in some of the other countries. So our success story is going to get replicated in some of the other countries, and India is going to be an enabler there. So there also, I think the soft power is going to increase because of that. So it's pretty important some of these initiatives, and we are seen as very successful country in some of the digital transformation. I think from the digital transformation I've seen in USA how the digital digitization work. I think we are far better than what the best of best economy is. So I think it's super important. The next question is related to what probably the question that came about the newest technology like ChatGPT, AI/ML, and how it is going to impact the workforce and the job, right? So this is a very interesting debate. There are two schools of thoughts. One school of thoughts, is that look, every time there is a new technology, and and by the way, this chat GPT is just not an incremental technology. I think it's a complete breakthrough in technology. And every time there is a breakthrough in technology, the number of technical skill people are required actually increases and not decreases, right? I know the kind of talks which were there before Y2K, for example, right? That after Y2K, everything will get, no jobs would be there for all these IT outsources, but it didn't happen it like that, right? Or with the internet, with the mobile, every time I think there was a shift, there was similar type of apprehensions that were there. I'm sure there's going to be a disruption, and it's not going to be a small disruption. Because a lot of skills that we have will have to kind of shift to a new type of skill. Like for example, prompt engineering is the new skill that everybody is running after, and there is a lot more data that would be required for the AI and ML to work, right? So my sense, the one theory is that, look, I think there's going to be a much more employment opportunity, but yes, the skill set will have to be a little bit different, and the engineers will have to adapt themselves to it. The other school of thought is that, look, this is going to be a complete disaster, and a lot of jobs will get lost, and a lot of outsourcing activities will get impacted. I prescribe to the earlier school of thought, and I think that things might get little worse in some quarters and in some segments, but other than that, in general, there's going to be more demand for technology, and that's something which will enhance the importance of India and Indian skill set in technology. So that's the short and long answer of that. The third question is about the digital transformation across the industries and the demand in the skill set and the hiring trend. I think I kind of covered that, which is similar to what I said about the AI/ML. That digital transformations, whether it is in the tech industries or whether it is outside the tech industries, that will keep increasing, and the demand for technology never goes down. There could be a short term kind of blip on that, which right now in OAG is seeing that. If you have seen the results that we declared last week, our job growth is actually negative territory, and our revenues were kind of flattish. But I think this is probably a quarter to quarter phenomena, because one has to understand that last year same period we had grown by 80%, right? So it's almost like in a year we have doubled it, right? So obviously with that type of a base growth, it's hard to keep the growth rate going in a similar way. So I think it's a short-term blip in my view, but in the long run, I think this will, maybe by Q3, Q4, you will start the job market improving much better. However, I must also add here that there is a little bit of a paradoxical that when it comes to the housing market, we also run the property 99acres.com, and we are seeing a lot more movement over there. A lot more transactions seem to be happening, and there's more velocity over there, which is a little paradoxical that job market is sluggish, but real estate market seems to be doing well. Same thing is that if you look at all the luxury brands, they seem to be doing well, but some of the core industry doesn't seem to be doing well. So that's my take on what the recent trends are. The fourth question is about the disruption, post global disruption, and the impact of that in consumer confidence and job creation. I think one more aspect that I think it's continuation of what I said earlier, but I think one more aspect I want to talk about is that there is a lot of volatility, particularly in job market, particularly because our growth is mainly coming from service segment. Now, what happens in service segment is that you don't have inventory, you don't have capex in a cycle. If the demand increases, suddenly there is a growth in job, and if demand is subdued, there is a sudden drop in the job market. Unlike manufacturing or the infrastructure-driven economies, where the employment comes at the end of the capex cycle, not at the front. So because of that, there is a lot more volatility in the job market, because we are far more driven by the services cycle. Our GDP is more dependent on services for its growth than on the manufacturing part of it. The last question is about the Startup India. I think it's super important, the Startup India initiative that government has taken. We have created a good ecosystem, and I think the good part is that few of the startups which got listed in the market, They have seen a cycle where there was so much of enthusiasm and upbeat in the market, and then later on, the companies which were not keeping good, not sharing good, qualitative information with investors, companies who were ignoring the investors, so to say, or the companies which were continuing to do a lot of cash burn have been punished as well. Some of them have now come back to the original IPO prices. Some of them are above that, some of them are still below that. So I think the fact that some of these startups have gone through the entire cycle in the stock market, I think it's a good learning for them. It's a good learning for the new startups also, that they should not take the public markets for granted and public investors for granted. They are far more savvy. They are far more vigilant about what's going on inside the company, and one should not take that for granted. I would still want government to do a lot more on the startup side, because if you really look at all the large companies balance sheet, there's so much of cash available in every company, and the cash that's available on the corporate balance sheet is still not started floating into the startup investments. InfoEdge is doing a lot more startup investments. We have about 75 to 80 active startups. You know about Zomato, Policy Bazaar. We were the founding shareholders over there, and we continue to be the largest shareholders over there. But we have many other startups also that we have invested along with Temasek. But I have not seen the other corporates doing that, right? And I would really want government to make the startup environment even more conducive, so that the corporate cash which is lying gets into the incubation of startup, and that leads to technology and intellectual property growth in the country.